What makes defining historical tennis eras so subjective? Imagine trying to draw a line in the sand that separates one tennis era from another. It sounds simple, but in reality, it's quite tricky. That's because defining these periods depends on many different factors. When we compare different times in tennis history, we look at advanced and historical data, but even then, opinions can vary a lot. First, the criteria used to define an era are not set in stone. Some people focus on the dominance of certain players who win most matches over many years. Others might look at the level of competition or how many top-ranked players were active at the same time. But deciding who qualifies as dominant and for how long is not always clear. Different analysts might set different thresholds for what counts as a dominant player or a strong period. Next, the sport itself has changed a lot over time. Equipment like rackets and strings have improved, making the game faster and more powerful. Playing surfaces have evolved, with some tournaments switching from grass to hard courts or clay. These changes make it hard to compare achievements across eras. For example, winning on a grass court in the 1970s might be very different from winning on a hard court today. Historical data is another tricky part. Records from earlier periods are often incomplete or less detailed. Before the Open era started in 1968, players competed in amateur and professional circuits separately. This meant many top players never faced each other, making it hard to judge who was truly the best. Without consistent data, comparing players from different times becomes more about opinion than fact. Cultural and personal opinions also influence how we see eras. Fans and experts might value different things, like rivalry intensity or playing style. Some argue that earlier players had it tougher because they used less advanced equipment, while others say modern players face higher physical demands. These subjective views shape how we define and interpret different periods in tennis history. From a data perspective, we look at dominance metrics, such as rankings or match results, to identify strong players. We also examine the presence or absence of top players during certain times to mark strong or weak periods. Changes in rules, equipment, and professional status are taken into account to understand the context. But we must always remember that gaps or inconsistencies in historical records can influence these assessments. Using advanced data helps us compare eras more objectively, but it can never fully eliminate subjective opinions. It allows us to see patterns and trends, but personal and cultural factors still play a role. That's why defining tennis eras remains a balancing act between facts and personal judgment. Each person might see the same period differently based on what they value most. So, the reason why defining historical tennis eras is so subjective is because of the many different criteria, the sport's evolution, data limitations, and personal viewpoints. All these elements make it impossible to draw a single, clear line that everyone agrees on. Instead, it's a mix of facts and opinions that shape how we understand tennis history.